Hey gang, welcome to this first update, and I don't know how many months. Actually, what's going on in the world and with the earth, I think I should do an update every other day. There's just so much volume to the garbage that's going on out there. Now, with this update, I'm going to tend to be all over the map, and what I want to say first is that as we progress through this next several months, Dave and I are going to try to get an update out there to you at least every month or two. And some of them will be live in this format, others will be pre-recorded, but I want to keep you updated on a number of things that are unfolding. And I want to try to give you a better picture of what's happening with this building up of all the foundation for the major collapse that lies ahead. You know, you look at the papers or listen to the interviews or whatever else, you say to yourself, my God, is there no end to all of this? And I'm thinking, you know, now more than ever, you cannot put your skills on a shelf. They're becoming more and more essential. And not just the physical skills, but the spiritual skills as well. There has to be a balance there in order for there to be a completeness. You know, one of the things that really hit me hard when Grandfather described the coming of the red skies, he said, basically that the red skies are going to come. But he said the major question is how many people are going to be alive to witness it. And that was very troubling for me because it fit in order a lot of the other things Grandfather said, such as the 10 years before the event of the red skies, we're going to see a rapid decline and a culling of both people, livestock, crops, things like that. So the way I look at it is that from what he said, we've got a good 5.5 years before the major collapses begin to take place. I'm not saying that they're not taking place now. It's more like a foundation is being built. Things are going wrong in bits and pieces, so to speak. And eventually this is going to build up to a head. And when that head explodes, that's when we're going to see these major disruptions. It's no longer going to be a little bit here, a little bit there. I mean, you take everything together and that has gone on in the world from what's taking place in England or has taken place in England and throughout other areas of Europe, even in this country with just the random shootings, the hatred, the hate crimes, and all the other things, it's getting absolutely frightening. And, you know, I never thought when Grandfather spoke about this, I never thought I would see an acceleration rate the way we have over the last 4 or 5 years. And, you know, when I think about 5 years from now, that greater acceleration rate, I can't even wrap my mind around something like that because it's happening faster than anybody can keep tabs on it. You know, poor Phil Martin, who just bust his butt getting out that belly of the beast. I mean, he's trying to figure out what to include and what to omit. And so many times for everything that's included in that magazine that he sends out, there's 20 things that he has to set aside. They're not quite as important, but if you back off, you're saying, geez, this should have been, included. But the magazine would be voluminous, to say the least. You know, I was just in the camp today addressing the Shadow Scouts. We're about to start the Scout class this Sunday. And I said to them, basically the same thing I said to you. You know, we've got about 5.5 years, and this may be the last few times we will be meeting as shadows. You know, when you think of 5 years, they have 5 more times of being a shadow before plane flights become prohibitive, communication systems break down or they're non-existent, or you're worried about getting food and water for your family rather than, you know, trying to go down and educate a class or inspire people. So it's getting to a point, we're almost drowning in our own filth, our own chemical waste, and it's coming to a head. And what's frustrating to me is it seems like pretty much out there, everybody's turning a blind eye. And again, it's Band-Aid solutions where we need major surgery, and it's not happening. And these things will not bear much, if any, of a delay. Anyway, before I get into anything else, we got to check our systems real quick. I know it's a little bit early, but I'm not going to keep you very long tonight. I just want to touch base with you with a couple of things that have been pressing on my mind. Let's take the 10, gang. Hey gang, welcome back. You know, I catch myself because of the magnitude of the subject that I'm trying to cover here. An emergency update. I tend to get to racing, and oftentimes I get kind of emotionally caught up in the disaster that we're riding right now. And I'll slow it down, you know, because it's just, it sometimes gets too overwhelming and too overbearing a lot of times. A couple of you folks have asked where they could get anything they could read on the red skies or the 4 prophecies of man's destruction. It is in my book Journey under the title 4 Prophecies. And also in the quest, it's the first chapter of the quest called Prophecy. And, you know, I wrote those chapters, in fact, long before the holes appeared in the sky. It was turned into the publisher. And what I decided to do, and you can contact Dave for if you're looking into a copy of it, is that I took those 4 prophecies of man's destruction and I created 4 tapes. They're about 90 minutes apiece, where I, instead of delivering them in the way of the coyote and leaving you to figure it out, what I did is just blatantly spelled it out. And it's surprising how a paragraph can be turned into 90 minutes and sometimes more. But for those of you who are not that familiar, I know we have some new people here. That's where you can find it, or of course contact any of the long-term students that are on the chat room now. You know, if you look closely at what is evolving, one of the things that is bothersome now is, you no doubt heard by this time that a 2-year-old child just died of Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And it's bad enough that we've seen the evolution of Lyme disease and how that has grown resistant. This second strain of Lyme has grown resistant to our antibiotics in many cases, and it's getting harder to cure. There is another tick-borne disease that have emerged out of left field, tended to blindside the immunologist and the science that I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it's got a 10% death rate. And that is growing and becoming more problematic. And, you know, just by saying that, we're seeing this evolution of diseases that grandfather spoke of. Now, keep in mind that when he talked about disease, he talked about bacteria, fungal infections, viral infections, that kind of a thing. When he talked about affliction, he talked about diseases that were born from the chemical cesspool that we live within. You see, there's been no real research done on what happens when you dump chemicals X, Y, and Z into the environment that are mixed with F, G, and H. What compounds do they produce? What pathogens? What carcinogens? Nothing has really been done about that. And all of that's going to come to a head and create this laundry list of new afflictions that are not bacteriologically based, nor viral or fungus based, but based on that chemical cesspool. They're very, very hard to detect on a physical level. That's why I stress to people, it is not enough to build up just your physical skills, especially that of awareness, which Grandfather considered not only to be the most important physical skill, but also the most important spiritual skill. There is going to be some of these areas that are vectors of affliction that have no telltale evidence on the environment. It doesn't affect, for instance, the plants or any visible effect on the animals or water until it's well too late and you've accidentally blundered into it. You know, another thing that's going on is, and this has really got me concerned, many of the big cats, and I'm talking about like the lions, the tigers, the mountain lions and things like that, they're contracting a virus that is affecting their mind, their nervous system, where they absolutely lose all fear of humankind, all fear of anything for that matter. And we're seeing a surge in cases where mountain lions will go through, for instance, the one that happened about 3 or 4 years ago, went through a dog door in a house and started to rip, people apart. The frequency of big cat attacks in India and in Africa is growing in the last 10 years more than it's happened in the past 50 years. And they can't tell what has mutated this virus. And I suspect it's like Grandfather said, it's from that chemical cesspool, which is one of the things, the vectors, the precipitators that will so change the normal pathogens we deal with. And that is a very frightening prospect that we have to face. But again, as that redundancy in diseases works through all 4 prophecies, as Grandfather said, the normal diseases are going to become resistant to our most advanced pharmacological agents we can find, but then there's going to be diseases that we've never heard of before, we've never encountered before. Look at what's happened to malaria. The original malaria now has grown practically resistant to most of our advanced, forms of fighting it. And a lot more people are dying of it. And it's not just going to be the human animal that it attacks. It's going to be our livestock and our food crops. And that puts us in a very dangerous situation. Like I tell people, what extent would you go to protect your family, to feed your family, to get them fresh drinking water, where you got millions of people out there going to do the same thing? And you're talking about a world now that is out of control, and people that will go to the ends of extremes to take care of their loved ones and their friends. And we have to factor that into this equation. The problem is now that, as Grandfather said, and it will only be heard on the whispers of a mice, or of the mice. Now, what that meant is in the day and hour we're living in now, that yes, certain events will be right in our face and huge, but the overall acceleration of collapse and how fast and horrific is going to happen right now can only be heard on the whispers of a mouse. That means you have to be that aware. You have to be that close to nature to notice the patterns broken, the cadence, the rhythms, out of sync with anything that has ever been before. And we're seeing this in a big way where animals that their northern range was in South Carolina, now we're finding in New Jersey. We're finding it in New York, lower New York State, things that have never been up here before. And it's continuing. And the spread, for instance, a big indicator is the spread of malaria. That's gone out of hand, plus the death rate of moose and elk from, of all things, freezing to death, because the winters are not killing off the mass amount of ticks that they usually kill off. And what's happening is the moose, the elk, and sometimes the deer are getting infected so badly that they rub all the hair and flesh off their body. Come winter, there's not enough insulation, there's not enough hair on their body to keep them alive. That the wasting disease has proliferated. And you know, the problem is that when these start to accelerate, and throwing in the mix the affliction, when these start to accelerate, there is no way that science is going to smugly sit there and say, we're going to find a cure. Because cures don't happen that fast. The big one they just let out of the bag, this new penicillin that'll kill everything, well, that's only going to last a few years. You and I know it before they mutates right out of existence. And that's the frightening thing. Look, let's take a quick 5-minute break. I'm kind of losing my voice here, and we'll get right back together, gang. 5 minutes. Hey gang, welcome back. You know, another thing I didn't add to this, and the medical community and immunologists has been talking about this now for a while. We're about ready to be hit by a massive flu epidemic. When it's going to come next year or the year after, they don't know. Very similar to that very deadly Spanish flu that happened a few years back. And their problem is that they're not really sure how to create the flu shot against it, but they can see it already starting in its mutation stages, and that, in my mind, is a big one coming. But anyway, you know, I called this together mainly because I want to do this more often, and I said both in the format of live online, but also sometimes when some critical things happen is to put it out there in a videotape so you can look at it at your leisure. But the big thing you should take away with you right now is I feel very strongly, especially with what Grandfather said and what he called the culling, which will start about a decade before the red skies. I think we got about 5.5 years left before the major collapses come into play. What we're seeing now is a building process, small little things coming together that are eventually going to create that proverbial tipping point. And when that tipping point reaches, the acceleration will be unimaginable. And I give it, 5 years maybe. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if it didn't happen sooner. The other thing that I really want to hammer home here, and it's very important to me, is for the last year and a half, almost 2 years, I've been pressing what I call the prayer of warning. Grandfather actually called it the sacred prayer of warning. As I try to explain it to people, you know, with Grandfather, it was an unspoken rule with him that every evening at sunset, every morning at sunrise, we'd each retire to our sacred area to fast, to pray, to introspect, to give thanksgiving, that kind of thing, but also a number of other things, practice our skills in essence. But the one thing that he always stressed was that sacred prayer of warning. And the way I teach it is simply to tell students once a day, preferably twice, when you are in your sacred time, and I'll tell you, the biggest gift you can give yourself is to follow what Grandfather said. For a handful of minutes in the morning and again at night, to take quiet time, sacred time, to introspect and to thanksgiving, and most of all, to empower that prayer of warning. Well, the feedback I've been getting, I noticed that from some students, that the warnings are so clear. As I say, you know, they'll come as a simple uneasiness or a degree thereof, or a feeling that something isn't right. And all you need to do is surrender for the origins of this feeling to make itself known. And they're so accurate with it that they know when one of their children are going to blunder into danger, or when their significant other is getting upset, or at work, or out shopping, or whatever they're doing. While other students, it has to be some kind of crazy big event for them to feel that uneasiness to begin with, or that something isn't quite right. And I researched the feedback, and I find that those people that tend to get the warnings clearer and sooner are those people who have taken the philosophy workshop, the higher levels, or especially the temples of the soul. And I realized then where the problem lies is that unless you take this prayer where you're crying up to the Creator, to the depths of your insides, in the core visceral area, and there is that need, that yearning, that hunger behind it, then don't expect stellar results. This prayer, when you say this, and it should be done at least once a day, I do it every day, twice a day, sometimes more, on that deep visceral level. So I know when I'm about to blunder into possibly a radiation spill, or one of my children are in trouble, or one of the Tracker family is in need of help, I stress that more than anything now, because, as I said, our physical skills are only going to take us so far. And unless we open up a greater spiritual part of ourselves, we're going to miss a lot of the early warnings, a lot of the things that we should know about to keep us safe, our families safe. So please, when you go into that time, that sacred time every day, take that prayer to the deepest recesses of your soul in such a hungering, yearning way. And any kind of peripheral approach, or if it's not deep enough, is not going to work that well. You know, Dave and I just put together the online schedule for the next year, and you'll not next year, the fall winter. you'll notice that it is dealing with exactly what I'm talking about now. The class is like the timeline to the collapse, where I want to get into a more specific time frame for when things are about to happen. The vision of warning, which takes this empowered, sacred prayer of warning to even a deeper level, but that's going to take some doing. And then, of course, a whole series on afflictions, the identity and the vectors that these afflictions from the chemical cesspool are going to come from, and then also treating afflictions, which is very, very difficult to do. We're going to also do that one in the Pine Barrens, very similar to the Hidden Secrets of Fire, Hidden Secrets of Tracking, where we're going to bring in a balance. We're going to deal with trapping and baiting, stalking, and stuff like that. And then go figure, the last one is Transcending Crisis, which I think is essential in the years that come. But anyway, please, gang, we are not blessed with a lot of time. Like one student said to me, he was back in the class in the 80s, and I talked about the red skies being in, 2022, 2023 time frame. And they thought, wow, that's so far away. And they came up to me not too long ago and they said, oh my God, it is a little more than 10 years away now. So, and out of that, we got about 5 years. 5 years. And then I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't think we're going to be able to get together as groups. I don't think we're going to have this format. I don't think we're going to be able to travel with any kind of safety in mind. I think that people are going to be too involved, not so much working, but finding food, finding water, staying free of diseases, and getting the hell out of Dodge, to tell you the truth. But the other reason I wanted to bring you together tonight is for that sacred prayer of warning. That you have to take to a deeper gut, visceral level, the temples level, in order for it to work. And remember, after you've implanted this prayer, any feeling that something isn't quite right, or there's a degree of uneasiness that blindsides you, immediately surrender. And the originator, the precipitator of that will make itself known at the bottom of surrender. Gang, look, time is running out. Stay close to each other. Stay in touch with each other. Because the only way we're going to make this is as a family. And as grandfather envisioned it. As I said, that old man, that term tracker family didn't fall flippantly from his lips. It was a reality. The reality that's going to possibly, oh no possibility about it. It will carry us through. So do all you can with your skills, both physically and spiritually. Keep at it. Stay in touch. Share your visions and dreams, the situations you're in. If you find yourself in trouble, reach out to any of us. We're all here, and it's something we don't have in this world right now. If you feel like you're at the end of your rope, get in contact with us. Anybody there, the elders, the visionaries, the ghost talkers, the Tracker family. Good night, gang.